such as labor unions, social clubs, and migrant communities found in urban and industrialized settings. Nonetheless, anthropology remains broadly comparative in its scope, taking all societies into account and treating them all as equally significant. At the same time, anthropology continues to be firmly rooted in the descriptive richness that comes out of the specific encounters anthropologists have with particular peoples and places. Often we have found our greatest strengths to be those of the storyteller. Throughout this book, we will be illustrating our presentation with anecdotes from our fieldwork. This, by the way, is quite typical for anthropologists, for whom the immediacy of the encounter with an exotic culture never really fades. So let us tell you a bit about the two societies with which we are the most familiar. Peter did his primary research among the Daodongo for 2 years in the early 1980s, with several subsequent shorter visits. At the time, the Daodongo numbered around 20,000 people, living in the highland massif that sweeps up on the west side of Bima Bay, a spectacular natural harbor in the eastern end of the island of Sumbawa. Sumbawa lies about midway in the long arc of islands stretching from Sumatra to Timor in Indonesia. It is the second major island east of Bali. The eastern half of Sumbawa is called Bima, although that is not the local name, and is mostly occupied by a much larger ethnic group who call themselves Dalmabojo, and are usually referred to as the Bimanese by outsiders. As part of the ancient Javanese Majapahit Empire, Bima was a Hindu kingdom. When that empire collapsed in the early 17th century, Bima and her people became Muslim, and today are known as among the most fervent Muslims in Indonesia, a country where perhaps 85% of the population confess that faith. The Daodongo, however, had remained outside the Bimanese kingdom while it was a Hindu kingdom, and became part of the Muslim Sultanate of Bima only much later, and by treaty rather than by conquest. They were able to retain their relative independence in part because they had a reputation as fierce warriors, and in part because their mountainous territory was relatively easy to defend. Daodongo means mountain people. Although they became part of Muslim Bima, the Daodongo retained certain political privileges and did not, by and large, accept Islam, but held fast to their indigenous religious beliefs and practices. It was their stalwart refusal to accept the religion of their suzerain and neighbors that first interested Peter in the Daodongo. He set out to see what role this might have played in establishing an ethnic boundary between the Daodongo and the Bimanese, despite the fact that they share a common language, Ngahi Mabojo. By the time of Peter's first survey trip to Dongo, as the district is most sensibly called, most Daodongo had accepted either Islam or Christianity, although, as the local Roman Catholic catechist put it, the people are 70% Muslim, 30% Catholic, and 90% Kafir, pagan. Studying religious beliefs became a major focus of Peter's fieldwork, as did studying the way the people went about resolving disputes. When Peter returned to Dongo in 1981 for a 2-year stay, he was accompanied by his wife, Anne, who was, to put it mildly, a real trooper. They lived in the village of Doro Natika, the oldest and, with a population of about 3,000 spread over several hamlets, the largest of Dongo's traditional villages. Conditions were quite primitive. Doro Natika had no running water, no electricity, no paved roads. The houses, on the other hand, were comfortable, built of teak and resting on stilts 1.5 meters high or more, with roofs of thatch, tile, or galvanized iron. The local economy was in something of a transitional period. Formerly, the people had had a relatively self-sufficient subsistence by means of the cultivation of swidden rice, maize, and millet, supplemented with bananas, coconuts, and other fruits, together with products gathered from the mountain forest, including the most wonderful honey. Swidden